So what are the spiritual roots of the destruction of the first and second temples? So, according to the first source in Masechet Yoma, it's idol worship, immorality, which is adultery, and bloodshed, murder. According to this source, when from Sanhedrin 96b, when the Babylonian general Nebuzaradan came to Jerusalem with this, 300 mules laden with iron axes that could break iron, but they were all shattered on a single gate of Jerusalem. Meaning, so what this source is saying is that it actually wasn't the Babylonian general who destroyed Jerusalem, because as the God, right? He's quoting from the Lamentations, Echad, the God has trodden down the virgin daughter of Judah, the temple, as in a winepress. Meaning, it's actually God who's doing this. And that when this Babylonian general was so exalted that he just conquered Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, a voice came forth from heaven saying to him, "You have slain a dead people, you have burnt a temple already burned, you have ground flour already ground." In other words, it wasn't, what they're emphasizing here even more clearly than in the first source, is that the physical causes of the destruction of Jerusalem were not the actual causes for the destruction of the temple. There were spiritual causes that related to the Jewish people. That at some level, the temple already burned. It was like an empty structure. It was like a skeleton. And the Jewish people had already withered when the Babylonians came. Okay? So this relates to a machloket, a disagreement among the Jewish sages about Hanukkah. Is the miracle of Hanukkah the military victory? In which case, what is being celebrated is the Maccabees and Judah the Maccabee and these rebels, and it also parallels in modern times how the Zionists celebrate Yom HaZikaron and the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which is the same day as Yom HaZikaron, and I'm pretty sure there's another stream which is celebrating the miracle of the lights, which is a godly miracle. That somehow this one menorah, this one jar of oil lasted for eight times as much. And that's a godly miracle, which is parallel to how the Haredim today don't observe Yom HaZikaron, they observe Tisha B'Av as the day of Jewish remembrance, which isn't celebrating the Jewish fighters of the Warsaw Ghetto, who are strong and even though they're being oppressed, they're fighting back, but it's observing how the first and second temple were destroyed because of Jewish sins. How does that sit with you?
I'm confused a little bit by the notion that the Romans came in and they shattered, all of their iron was shattered on a single gate. Does that mean that the gate withstood their assault, or that they demolished the gate? I'm confused by that.
I think it means they demolish it, and this was the Babylonians. So this
Right.
is talking about the first temple.
Okay, so they demolished the gate. Okay, so just so that I understand what this is about.
Although I think it's saying initially it's saying that he came with these 300 iron axes, mm-hmm. but they were all shattered. Meaning the axes were shattered, but then it's saying because the gate was very strong, okay. Meaning it was repelled right. by the gate. But then he wanted to come back, and he said, "No, I'm afraid of less what happened to Sanherib, who was the Assyrian leader who didn't conquer Jerusalem, but exiled the 10 tribes." And then a voice cried out, "No, you need it. The time has come for the sanctuary to be destroyed." Mm-hmm. And so God's inviting him in to destroy the temple.
So God is inviting him to destroy the temple, which God has already destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
That's confusing.
Or which the Jews in some ways have already destroyed through their sins.
So God is inviting an outsider to like deliver the final blow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's just like, which also sort of, that's like, so that's part of what I'm trying to bring out through this teaching, which is that, because like one of the challenges ecologically is that we're facing like a really big situation, which like in many ways is like overwhelming to most people who read about it, and it's like, wow, like I just read this article about China as like building like they have this Belt and Road project, and they're investing like hundreds of billions of dollars to build new roads and bridges and coal-fired power plants like around the world. And it's like, wow, like, well, but we're like trying to curb climate change, and they're like moving ahead with all this like infrastructure. Like it seems like all hope is lost. And yet, I one of the things that comes out for me here, when I was in yeshiva, actually it started when I was in college, but when I was in yeshiva, I started especially having back problems. Like my first day in yeshiva means sitting. Like my back like really hurt. Like I actually went to the doctor. He was like, take ibuprofen. But my back like continued to hurt through yeshiva. And then like after I was in yeshiva for 7 years, I went to this person who practices network spinal analysis. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like an alternative form of chiropractic. And he did this technique of where he just like touched my back. I like sat on a massage table, and he just like touched my back like in a few places, and I just like sat there for half an hour, sort of like acupuncture, but he just like tapped it in a couple places, and that like really helped my back problems. And so I feel like that with like solutions. Has anyone read the Cat in the Hat Comes Back from Dr. Seuss? Dr. Seuss is like a real chacham. Like it's like that book, The Lorax, and the Butter Battle book. They're like there's some really deep teachings there. And he talks about this thing called the vroom, of this like it's like something that's like you don't have to effort so much to solve things. You can just like it's like with this Babylonian general, he just like taps it and it falls down, because there's like something spiritual that he is fulfilling, even though he himself is probably unaware of that.
But are we not rooting for the Babylonian guy? It's I think what's sitting strangely for me is like that we're looking at his effort to destroy Jerusalem, which happened sort of effortlessly with his one axe, and we're celebrating that right now. Right?
But it's giving us insight into like the spiritual reality that we could like tap into.
Yeah, which is that like the temple stood in the merit of the Jews' spiritual practice. Like when the Jews were living a spiritually righteous life, then the temple stood, and there's meaning in the temple. It was like an alive place. It was like shedding spiritual light in the whole world. When Jewish practice became hollow and corrupt, and there was senseless hatred, then the temple had no meaning. It became brittle, and therefore God like enabled him to come. It also sort of answers a question I had, perhaps for many years, which is like, how did Hernando Pizarro go into the Incan capital in Cusco in 1519 with like 100 Spanish soldiers and defeat the Incan Empire? Like what's going on? There were like 20,000 Incan warriors there. Like, how did he do it? Didn't make sense. And the same thing with Hernando Cortez when he went to Tenochtitlan, Mexico City in 1523. It's like there were like 100 Spanish there. I mean, first of all, it's like when they coughed, they're like smallpox, like measles, like that was part of it. And if you've read Jared Diamond's Guns, Germans, and Steel, like the fact that they came on horses and with swords, like that was also part of it, because like these horses were like 4 feet tall, and which made them like 8 feet tall. But I actually for the first time, and I realized that I'm just like sharing like a lot of different things, but hopefully you're seeing how they're coming together. I read a really deep essay from Chief Seattle. when I was teaching at Jewish summer camps this summer that sit on Native American lands. And Chief Seattle wrote this essay in like the late 19th century of where he said, I'm not fully understanding why it is that the God of the white man has triumphed over the God of the red man. But it's clear that the God of the white man is favoring him in all the battles. Which is a sort of like, well, why is it that like Christian Europe conquered indigenous America? And like was like God part of that? I mean, it's that was like his theology, but there's like something like, and like, what is God's role in history? And like, what is God's role in climate change? You know, some people will say that God is bringing on climate change because it's part of the second coming. And it's like, and it's part of the apocalypse, it's part of the Armageddon. And that we need to bring it on. Like, we need to accelerate it. And actually one of my teachers in college, who was like a deep like spirituality person, he's like, I waste paper to accelerate the ecological decline.
Wow.
Do you think this is saying that the earth is like Jerusalem? It's just like this far away from collapse?
I don't think it's saying that, but the way that I'm like reading Jewish teaching is that like the climate change is messaging to us something very deep. That it's not just messaging to us the power of the fossil fuel companies, or like humanity's addiction to oil and like our love for all the things that in our lifestyle, including your flight tomorrow. And I'm flying. I'm flying in a few weeks to teach at Limud Festival. If anyone has been there, or has been to any other Limud, but I think what is climate change is really messaging, and like the acidification of the oceans and the loss of the great rainforests and the great boreal forests and the great plastic garbage patches the size of Texas off of Hawaii. What all of this is messaging is that, wow, there's something deep inside the human being that is seeking something very physical. It's seeking to extract and to take from the earth, and that we've become net takers from the earth instead of net givers, and that we've created a lifestyle and a society and a humanity that is about egoism, as opposed to altruism, as opposed to being net givers and giving to other people and caring about other species and other people. And that out of that deep imbalance in human spirituality arises all of the ecological crises that we're trying to sort of put out fires, but that until we address the deeper issues of why Earth has become so brittle, then like we're not going to really address, that we need to address the deeper roots to get at it. And the last thing I'll say, Gavi, before you go, is that several Jewish teachers, including the Rashba, say, if nistalek ha'ikar yistalek ha'tafel, if you get at the roots, then the peripheral issues will fall away. Or as Henry David Thoreau said, for every 100 people hacking at the branches of the roots of evil, one person's hacking at the roots. Or as Moshe Chaim Luzzatto says on the second page, for one who wishes to effect a complete cure for an illness must seek out its cause, after which he or she is in a position to remove the effect. And as a Chinese proverb said, a person is not sick because they have an illness. A person has an illness because they are sick. Welcome.
Thank you. Going to do your what is it?
So, what do you think? How does it sit with you?
Totally agree.
guess I would ask. Well, first of all, I'm a little confused. This is not about the parsha.
Nachon.
Okay.
I admit, but maybe we'll get to the parsha. We're not done yet.
Okay. And I guess then I'm wondering what, there's a little bit of victim blaming that feels like it's happening that is a little confusing. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Where?
I guess why is a person sick? What are the factors that have led to illness or sickness?
Yeah, so, I mean, this also sort of touches on, holistic medicine. And it's also sort of within a allopathic medical approach, like Western medicine. Sickness is because of different things, there's a virus, there's a bacteria, there's a cancer, there's a fungus that are in the body and they need to be rooted out. And you root them out through different interventions of, whether it's chemical therapy or radioactivity or antibiotic.
Target something specific.
Yeah, it's there's this thing in a colon. Okay, we'll cut it out, or surgery, or different things. Whereas a holistic approach is, and the problem with the Western approach is that even though it can be successful in addressing that issue, but oftentimes it grows back.
Because it's just addressing the symptom.
Exactly. Whereas a more holistic approach says, okay, a person's sick. Well, wow, what's going on? What's going on inside you? How you feeling? What type of behaviors do you do that might contribute to that sickness, and why do you engage in those behaviors? And then if we can change those behaviors and deep issues like feelings of are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling scared? Which also goes back to nonviolent communication of what are our needs? You have a need for comfort. You have a need for movement. If you address those needs, and that goes back to the donuts. Did anyone see the video I made about donuts?
Yeah.
I can share it with you. It's this proliferation of donuts in Jerusalem. Someone should do a study. Number of donuts eaten, a graph. How many donuts are eaten in Israel during Hanukkah? It's what are we seeking? What do we seek in the donut? It's a strategy for a need.
I guess I just think that it's also important to think about balance, or not kind of wholesale dismissing things. I agree that Eastern medicine is much better at seeking out balance of inner energies and holistic health. And if I get into a car accident, I'm not going to go to my acupuncturist. I'm going to go to the ER. And Western medicine is really good at emergency life-saving. In the same way, we've plundered the earth and we've become net takers. And I'm really grateful for air conditioning. So it's, yeah.
So I agree with you that emergency medicine is very effective at saving lives, and a lot of holistic practitioners agree that there's no alternative for Western emergency medicine. If someone is in a car accident, because it's actually a car is not a natural, so I agree with you about that. But it's sort of a question for more of the chronic illnesses that we're facing, because climate change is a chronic illness. It's been brewing for hundreds of years. And a Swedish chemist actually first theorized about climate change in 1896. So it's been 120 years that humanity has it's been on at some level in the consciousness of humanity. And it's a question of like, how do we deal with these chronic issues? And with air conditioning, it's also like on a hot day, air conditioning is very pleasant. But it's also a question of like, how do we use air conditioning, and how do we design our buildings so that we don't have to use air conditioning so much?
Right.
And can a person like,
Winter.
like oftentimes in the summer.
But it's like when people were building homes, like they didn't have that information.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm just also like wary of ascribing too much agency to human beings. Like I think like people are also eating donuts because like that's kind of the status quo at this point, and people are complicit. But it's like I don't know. Sometimes like just like giving people more information can change action.
And so that's part of it is like how do we educate ourselves, and also how do we tap into religious teachings so that we can become more educated about living sustainably, living in a healthy way. Should we learn a couple more sources? So if you turn the sheet, on the back is a teaching from the Maharal. Does someone want to read?
The Shekinah, divine presence, was among them, the Jewish people in the time of the first temple. This was the spiritual level of the first temple, that it was unique in its spiritual level, and that the Shekinah dwelled in it. Therefore its destruction occurred when it was not fitting for the Shekinah to dwell among them. That is, when the Jewish people made the temple impure, since God does not dwell amidst their impurity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this sort of reinforces the idea that there's a relationship between the Shekinah and the Jewish people in the temple. And you can sort of take it for granted that but the presence of the Shekinah depends on the spiritual level of the Jewish people. And if the Jewish people made the temple impure, then God doesn't dwell among them. And it's also, so that was the case with the first temple, and that was why the Babylonians destroyed it. What's interesting about Hanukkah, which occurred during the second temple, right, between when the Babylonians destroyed it and then the Jews rebuilt it and then the Romans destroyed it, but this is that the Syrian Greeks made the second temple impure, and like apparently there was like prostitution there, and like they even put like an idol of a pig in there, or like had pigs there and put other idols. Like they really like tried to like deny Jewish spiritual practice in the Jewish temple. It wasn't nice what they did. It wasn't conscious communication. Okay, it wasn't respectful. We have a need for respect. We have a need for dignity. And so the Maccabees came and restored that dignity violently. Apparently because they weren't able to say, you're not respecting us. You're not providing us with dignity.
Right.
But imagine a world that like it's not like they could do that. Imagine like if the Taliban could sit down with like the like other Afghans and say like, let's end our 100 years war.
I'm curious about if there's like different levels of God and how to reconcile that this idea that God is everywhere and everything, et cetera, and that God does not dwell amidst their impurity.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and this relates a little bit to prayer, which I hope your learning's going well in prayer. It's, I sort of think of like a metaphor that I like is sort of like a power converter. Do you all have these like like you have different size converters for different size appliances, and on the electrical lines there's also different step down converters to because at the power plants on the coast they're producing like huge amounts of electricity, which are then brought through these high voltage wires, so it's coming in at us at like 10,000 volts. And then, but we're using it at 120 volts, so there have to be like step-down converters along the way. And that also with God, like God is, this like huge light, this like huge force, and our ability to connect to God is like, we have these little plugs, we can expand our vessels, and that's also what Hanukkah is about, and that's why we're increasing the candles, and we're increasing our own capacity for light. So, yeah, and that's also with prayer, and also with Rav Raz, and other prayer leaders, is that's part of the prayer process. Is how do you begin at a certain level, and then you expand the vessel through the prayer, so that, and it's and that's also part of the insight of the way that Rav Raz leads prayer is you start out slow. It's you start out very slow, and then you build up. Whereas in a lot of Karl Bach shuls today, it's you start out fast, and it's yay, we're besimcha, and but no, to expand a kli, you have to. It's slow. It's gradual. So how about we look at how about the last couple of sources here. At the bottom, Rob said, all the predestined dates for redemption have passed, and the matter now depends only on repentance and good deeds. Rabbi Eliezer said, if Israel repent, they will be redeemed. If not, they will not be redeemed. Okay, so I just feel there is this element of spirituality that's part of the ecological crisis, of that God created planet Earth a very it's finely calibrated brakes, and if you push on them too much, it's gonna stop. So we need to live we need to live at a high spiritual level, to for us to merit living on this planet. I think that's part of what the ecological crisis is messaging. And if we live at the level of a lot of donuts, the Earth is not going to sustain us for very much longer. That's not the world that God created for humanity. We're supposed to be. Yeah, there's no question that Earth will be fine. Yeah. Unfortunately, if we go down, then we're going to take down about almost all of the 10 million species with us. And according to many conservation biologists, we've already extincted about half the species on the planet. Really? About 5 million species. Even though it's oh, that's weird. I didn't read that in the newspaper. Well, wait a second. You mean we've already extincted 5 million species? And then people will then get into the place of oh yeah, all hope is lost. There's nothing we can do. We've already destroyed the world. Well, wait a second. A minute ago you were just saying that there's no problem, and now you're saying that there's nothing we can do about it. What do you mean? The reason I think it's problematic, because in the long run, it'll be okay. Life will come back. Just like life did after the dinosaurs were extincted. But our teaching says, "Vayanichehu began Eden le'ovda l'shomra," and God placed us in the Garden of Eden to serve and conserve it. And if we fail, first of all, it's not fair. It's not fair to the poor people, because it's more of the wealthier people and middle class, upper middle class. It's not fair to the poor people. It's not fair to the indigenous people, and it's not fair to the 10 million species, and it's not fair to the young people who they're not the ones who caused it, and it's not fair to the next generation, and it's not fair to God. God didn't create us for us to destroy this planet. So that's part of religion today. That's part of what I'm trying to raise the awareness. Is hey, religion, if we don't deal with these issues, then there's not really much to religion. Okay, if religion can't speak to ensuring our children inherit a livable planet, then religion may go down in the dustbin of history. Chaim. Okay, and that's the next source here from Proverbs. Without vision, the people destroy, but praise is the person who keeps the Torah. Okay, chazon. That's why Nigel Savage named it chazon. Okay, I don't know if you know, Nigel's the president of Chazon. It's like it's the second source from in the second part. But be'ein chazon ipara am. Without chazon, the nation becomes pharaohed. The nation becomes like Pharaoh. It becomes destroyed. It becomes parua, which is undisciplined.
And chazon is vision.
Yeah, if you can't discipline your eating of donuts, O Am Yisrael, then the minhag becomes obscene. Okay?
Discipline is hard.
Yeah, but religion is supposed to inculcate in us discipline. Whereas in the world today, advertisers and consumer society has realized that it can get us to be undisciplined in order to make money. Okay, that's why in the next source, in Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, the wise person has their eyes in their head, whereas a fool walks in darkness, but I also realize that the same fate awaits them all. What does it mean? Okay, and if you go down to the Talmud Yerushalmi, the next source, Rabbi Meir said, he quotes it, that the wise person has their eyes in their head. What does it mean? Like, everyone has their eyes in their head. Like who doesn't have their eyes in their head? Okay? And he says, what about the fool? Where are his eyes or her eyes? In their feet? Right? Like, Rabbi Meir's making a joke. Like, said Rabbi Abba Mari, the wise person, when he or she is at the beginning of a matter, he knows what will be at its end. In other words, that they have their eyes in their head, meaning they can see the future. They can see what will be. There's some chachamim. Until he passed away, Rav Virgil Zatzal, I used to go to him. He's in Netivot. I used to go to him to ask questions, and he was able to see, to give advice every day, every morning. Hundreds of men would show up to ask him questions. It's like a wise person can see, and that's why, like, the great religious figures of our time, like from many religions, they can see that if consumer society continues as it is, then the fate of humanity is in danger. Like, it's clear. They agree with the scientists. The scientists can tell us from the data, but the spiritual leaders can tell us from the vision. So, B'ezrat Hashem, we should go lamala. We should keep raising up our spiritual levels. Every person has 5 levels of soul, and each level of soul has 5 levels. So we have 25 levels, and we can live at the higher levels. That's what we're supposed to do here. That's what it means to be a religious person.
Can you give us one action item to take away?
Yeah, one action item. I would say that after we eat something, it's good to give thanks and to just be like, wow, source of all living being, that was such a nice tea. Like, wow, those Indonesian tea leaves, that water, that fresh water here in the mountains. Like, thank you for the tea.